Revati is the last and the final nakshatra in the cosmic process of evolution. At all the levels, Revati is sattvic, soft, and focused on the pure essence of existence or non-existence. The Vedic deity presiding over it is Pushan, a nurturer, a name given to the sun for measuring the sky. Its primary motivation is moksha, or liberation, which is never to be conquered easily. That is the reason why many Revati people are often put in life scenarios where they need to dwell with good and evil, to labor or give birth to something which needs additional extra care. Revati is a great womb in which the sun dwells in dormancy, while the impulse of the next creative cycle arises in Aries. That is the reason why Revati natives are often dwelling with forces that are leftovers of good and bad, souls and spirits that need to be moved eternally from one eternity to another. For example, in movies, Revati actors often personify not evil, but more of characters who govern the imaginative, and imaginative is never so la space where moksha, liberation, is the final goal. This hard and harsh process of putting things to eternal death is the reason why characters can be seen as evil or even morbid. So every Revati actor is immersed in a few distinctive Revati topics. Maleficent. She is invited to finish the ultimate Revati task, to unite two forces together. Elvira, the funny character of Mistress of the Dark, came to claim her inheritance, which is also a very important Revati topic, the attribution of wealth that is gained as an honor for completion of good karmas in this final instance of the zodiac. Bette Midler in Hocus Pocus plays a witch on a mission of immortality, and she even has a cat, which is very associated with Revati, and you will see it in nurturing of pets. There are pet lovers. But another example, Penny Dreadful. She fights for what is being lost, a brutal abduction, and Revati is the ultimate caretaker who fights for people and animals to live no matter what. Marlon Brando in The Apocalypse Now travels further and further into the heart of darkness. In fact, he is even depicted as that heart of the darkness. Ellen Bernstein, the most known for a role of a mother in Requiem for a Dream, where she's dwelling in a horror of the most unwanted human conditionings. Serbian actresses like Milena Predic and Isidora Simjonovic have prominent Revati moon placements, and they're often casted for roles that are quite dark and personified good or evil. We see Isidora in roles that are with a lot of close-ups and the huge passages without seeing her speaking, and the accent on action of defeating good or evil. In Koreni, Milana plays Kata, who decides to change the traditional values of good and bad, deciding to marry a lower caste and nurture the different cycle of life. We also project the massive sexual meaning into Revati actresses, and Isidora's role in the movie Clip, where she plays the lower class student indulging in sexual pleasures, often triggers the most forbidden fantasies within ourselves. We see a bunch of movies with sex scenes, even with underage people, but this one may have triggered more forbiddenness of this subject. In non-imaginative reality, Revati people share those traits. They often have intense drive for gardening, pet loving. And so let's start. Bette Midler is a professional gardener, and she's making it literally like Revati Garden of Eden. Elvira, the actress, is a cat lady, and Eva Green is Revati collector. She's very passionate about taxidermy, collecting skulls and insects and putting them to eternal sleep or eternal life. Isidora is also a huge pet lover, fostering and adopting children and pets is the most important Revati trait, because Revati comes when someone needs to be healed and taken care of, and especially those who didn't get a proper care in childhood, like Angelina Jolie or Marlon Brando did in their real lives. It is associated with the unusual domesticity, gay marriages, polyamorous fantasies or realities, as they adopt the new ways of making unionships, and they're prone to extra care. And, for example, Ellen DeGeneres, she even has a pond with fishes in her home. Revati is also prominent among gay and lesbian people because its ruler is Mercury, a neuter planet. So it has many different ways in expressing sexuality. In pop culture, Whitney Houston was the one to redefine being emotional. And today, Rihanna and Cardi B are changing the image of sexuality. Like, for example, Isidora did in a movie clip. What I'm trying to point out is that Revati is a stage of, let's say, sexual latency, where it can pick up different polymorphic shapes and fantasies. And that's why Revati people have a free pass for spotlighting sexuality, let's say, where victory over sexuality is won. For example, in the previous nakshatra, Uttar or Purva Bhadrapada, we see the process of conquering the sexuality, and now we just see some dark or happy, but the vivid fantasy of sex and sexuality. The victory is the very important Revati trait, because it allows us to see the background events that are happening in the process of cosmic preparation, which heralds a new beginning. In history of human thought, Revati individuals gathered Jupiterian, because Revati is in the portion of Jupiter, so people are wise, but ruler is Mercury, so they're playful traits merge with Jupiterian qualities. That makes them very imaginative, but also very socially aware. Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative teaches us to be universal, but knowing that things are moral, and we are kind of unconsciously obliged to be moral, to put some truths to death, and bringing some others back to life. Both Jupiter and Mercury rule morals, so the universalizing of our truths is what most of the writers and philosophers did. In Chekhov's work, we see, similarly as in Kant's philosophy, that he refused the idea of progress as primary motivation. Revati's goal is liberation towards the truth, which we also see in very radical thinkers. For example, Bill Hicks, you know that guy, a comedian who stood for what is moral, and Emile Zola, who taught us on the ridicule of the bourgeois notion of love and life. Mercury is debilitated in Pisces, but what does it mean? That's the planet of cognition. So here it picks up the power to produce imaginative scenarios. Mark Twain, who is Revati moon, and even have 19 cats, and Hans Christian Andersen, they're kings, literally a kings of fairy tales, and those who left a major Revati legacy of a winning of the imaginative world. That is the reason why children are hearing about those stories today, because imagination always includes good and evil. A comic writer, Alan Moore, the author of Vendetta, tells us the story of a woman who is taking part in bringing down the fascist government, which is a reflection of Revati's breaking the unwanted patterns from childhood. She saved from life and death situation by a man who calls himself a V. So, in the conquest of winning over the futuristic Great Britain, she saved from life and death situation and saving others as well. In Watchmen, another Alan Moore's comic, we also see the Revati story unraveling. When one of his former comrades is murdered, masked vigilante Rorschach, you know, the test in psychology of projection, which is quite Revatian, uncovers a plot to kill and discredit all the past and present superheroes. Top Revati team, to put to sleep and to eternally revive. Approaching towards psychology, we meet another Revati native, John Cleese, who wrote a book with a famous psychologist, Skinner, Families and How to Survive Them. In their writings, they underline one important Revati truth, which is that the way we separate from our primary families will reflect the ways we are making new unions. Imagine that, a literal Revati meaning. Revati means a need for nurturing by breaking the unwanted patterns from childhood. So many psychologists and spiritualists have it prominent. Ram Dass was an American spiritual teacher, psychologist, and author. His best-known book, Be Here Now, has been described as a seminal and helped to popularize Eastern spirituality and yoga with the baby boomer generation in the West. So Revati is always marrying two realities together. In this case, West and East. Walter Benjamin, he has an unconferred birth time, and he's born either in the last degrees of Uttara Bhadrapada, the previous nakshatra, or the first degrees of Revati. Uttara Bhadrapada is most structurally abstract portion of Pisces. So, as an eclectic thinker, he's combining elements of German idealism, romanticism, and Western Marxism, which makes him quite of a mixture of Revati and Uttara Bhadrapada, being idealistic and romantic like Revati, but eclectic like Uttara Bhadrapada. He was strongly inspired by another and maybe most cosmically important Revati native, Baudelaire, who has 7 planets in Pisces and a Revati sun. Baudelaire is fundamentally a romantic in a Revatian dual sense, member of artistic movement that champions sublime passion and the heroism of the individual, and as a poet of erotic verse. We see a lot of erotic depictions in Revati art, but in some uncovered way, because they're making us see what is hidden, but without any mystifying regards. So, getting back to psychoanalysts, Donald Winnicott, he was the most gentle psychoanalyst in the real personification of Revati meaning, the unnurtured healer. We can avoiding big and new age words, but Revati can really be a wounded healer, because Winnicott's mother was severely depressed, and he developed a theory on depression, while even saying sorry to his clients to be overly interpretive, because Revati always gives a space for explorations of one's truth. This tells us a lot of the story of an elephant. It is the representation of Revati and the symbol of Revati nakshatra. And it arises the sense of external grandeur, but inwardly, elephant is unaware of huge honors that are bestowed onto him. Melanie Klein was another Revati native, and she was also a psychoanalyst, a very nurturing one, and she turned the psychoanalytic thought from father to mother and to more and more pre-Oedipal, more and more young formative years, trying to go all the way to the process of creation of life, and to pinpoint the earliest factors of development of neurosis. Gustavo Roll, likely to have moon in Revati, was a spiritualist who believed in spirito intelligente. He was Italian, and not that Italians are funny, but he was very Revatian funny. His devotees consider him to be a great spiritual master, and he testified to miraculous feats and supposedly accomplished by telepathy and clairvoyance. Their traumatic childhood can be a boost to put them in the helping professions, which is the case of Tony Robbins, a motivational speaker that yells to saying no. As Revati follows us on the other side, there are quite bad examples. For example, James Jones, a Revati cult leader, is the example of Revati from hell. He was American cult leader, preacher, and self-professed faith healer, and his inner circle orchestrated a mass murder suicide of himself and his followers. Not that I want to point out that there is something good, but it's quite Revatian. He wanted to put back them internally on the other side. But let's finish up the spiritual side of this nakshatra with Walter Mercado, a TV astrologer, a funny guy with a very mysterious life, who is telling us about a less discussed Revati trait. But before I begin, he's so trashed, and he did maybe trash astrology, but when he told that he had such an empathy for a pigeon that was dying, and he wanted to bring a life to him, even if he lied, that's a beautiful motivation for living. But what is that Revati trait? Similar to Purva Falguni, Revati wants to have a life of a party, but in very different, less extroverted manner. Purva Falguni is the heart of fifth house, the party, the small gatherings, the drinking, the romance, sex. And Revati is, sex, 12th house, but in isolated places. So Revati gathers people because of their conscious need to nurture them, not to have fun. For example, Mercado couldn't say no to anyone, and he was always a funny guy who makes jokes around, and he made quite of a good party on astrology. Film director Jean Renoir is the personification of Revati, Moon, because Moon tells us about the thinking pattern of a person. And in The River, his most famous film, that film is really such a remarkable meditation of a power of a place. He depicted the river Ganges, the very important Indian river which is also a lot taught on in the even in Revati nakshatra and all the watery nakshatras, as the center where happens the marriage of eternal life and eternal death. So we in the movie we see the marriage of two worlds, and we see the goddess Lakshmi, for example, the goddess of misfortune, marrying the river, the oceans with eternal life and death. Renoir's work was described as poetic idealism, and similarly to Émile Zola. Renoir made a chien. He depicted the unconventional love, which is a huge Revati topic, and it represents, in this case, it presents the working class man who married a prostitute. Union merely impossible, but with Revati people, very, very doable. Revati is prominent among women who changed the definition of beauty and being fashion moguls of their time. Revati has a very specific visual allure and glamour. For example, Elizabeth Arden was most powerful businesswoman of 20th century. She built a cosmetic empire. And she started with only 4 products, and now she even has she left the legacy of a company that has many products. Chances that Anna Wintour has also Revati moon, as well as the Krista Worthington, most celebrated but tragically past fashion journalist. Why so? The symbol of fish is indicative to very auspicious creative influence. The fish produces fertility, and it stands for rapid growth. Considered as a female, Revati has receptivity, which makes native very sensitive to external conditions, but they get awards for the completion of good. So they can materialize the beauty and celebrate the beatitude. In music, Revati also marries different layers. Not saying that, okay, I will divide it in few groups, but in music, Revati also marries different layers of life and death. Lisa Gerard, lead singer of Dead Can Dance, a group that kind of celebrates the life of death, is Revati native. So, the understanding of the process of death is bringing the additional, she's leaving us with a sense that we don't have a need for drama of dying, because attachment to this darkest topic is quite easily approached with Revati natives, who can tell us about death in non-dramatic manner. In opera, there are 2 most famous tenors, Pavarotti and Francesco Corelli. Revati is ruled by Mercury. And in my Jeshta video, another Mercury-ruled nakshatra, we also see opera singers or high-pitched voices, but tenors gives us a kind of a, not gory as in Jeshta, but more of a high-pitched, kind of a transcending into another dimension of voice, which Mercury allows Revati people to do. Revati is a very sweet nakshatra, and it has a very tumultuous inner life. It is soft and sattvic, but it has a quality that needs to endure the great obstacles for the chance to give birth and labor something new or put something into an eternal death. Those are very hard task to finish. So it moves us to the cosmic existence with the boundless durations and perseverance into the infinite sea of quietude and beatitude, moving us from one eternity to another.